Now live from inside the Matt Blatt Kia studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam Caplan, co-host of Inside the Birds podcast, you can find on any podcasting platform or on their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Brian Johnson's out as the offensive coordinator. I don't know if we say a surprise, not a surprise, but I guess we can start with Adam Caplan. Why did it happen? Why is Brian Johnson out after one season?
Yeah, and I'm sure tomorrow Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni will talk about it. They'll be asked about it in their season-ending press conference. But I know there's some speculation, Mike, that maybe Brian Johnson could be reassigned. That was never going to work. I know some people were speculating that. I'm like, no, that's not. You can't do that. In season, look, they could have fired Sean Desai. We thought it was awkward that they kept him on there. He was kept on there because Matt Patricia was supposed to run the same scheme, and he made too many adjustments to it, and that was a disaster. But with Brian Johnson, it's just kind of you could call him the fall guy because this one. See, they pin it on him, the Jalen Hurts regression. The offense did go south, but it was clearly not as good as last season. We all know that. It's one of the big reasons why their season kind of went south on them. Obviously, the defense was a big problem. But it's kind of like, okay, well, they ran the same scheme. Brian Johnson couldn't figure out, and he's being pinned for the offensive regression. It's a lot more than that. I'm not saying it's Brian Johnson's fault, but there are a lot of reasons why this offense regressed. It's not just Brian Johnson. If you want to pin it on him, the head coach has a lot to do with this. He didn't do a good enough job of understanding how you adjust. And when we're going to talk a lot about this on tomorrow's Inside the Birds, but when you see an offensive regression and you're the head coach and you're in charge of it all, you have to put a stop to it. You have to figure out how do you stop it? Sirianni never could do it, and that's for people wanting Sirianni fired. If they would have done it, this is obviously one of the things that's been not good for Nick is his inability to figure it out. That was very evident over that losing streak.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the follow-up would be, is the offensive scheme, will it change? Is Sirianni open to saying, hey, so-and-so's coming in, and they're going to install their offense and call the plays? Because it's our understanding that if this is Nick's offense, that someone else has to call Nick's offense.
Yeah, and I see that is the only guy that could do it, and it's why the rumors are out there with Jim Bob Cooter, is because he was here 2 years ago. But the problem is, I don't want to say the offense is broken. They still did a decent job on offense, but and we're going to talk about the West Coast offensive stuff too, the pure West Coast, which we know the rumors about that. We had some intel on this, which we put on our Monday morning show, but that's not a great fit either. There's certain things that you got to figure out how that would work. But to answer your question, Mike, if they're not going to run Sirianni's scheme, he's got to turn it over, and that guy's got to be able to run it whatever he wants. Nick needs to do a better job of handling stuff. This is. As much as we give Sirianni a lot of credit for stuff, and he's guy's a good head coach, some things got away from him, and I don't think he really handled, Mike, overall, if we were doing an overview of what happened, when things started to slide, I thought it got away from him, and a league source who used to work for the Eagles mentioned the same thing. He said that's where Nick really just did not do a good job of handling the turmoil. He's got to do a better job of that.
With that said, then, I mean, I don't know. We talked on Friday. Are you somewhat surprised that Nick made it out of that? Like, what did he say that won Jeffrey Lurie over?
Well, they had a plan. They had a plan, him and Howie Roseman. Nick kind of presented, his ideas on staffing and what has to change. And the thing I love to know, because we knew about, we put it out. We were one of the first people, if not the first, to talk about the Press Taylor issue. That was going to be a problem because the quarterbacks, one of the things that the Eagles had a problem with Doug Peterson was not only was the staff not good enough, but Wentz's regression. Nate Sudfeld, who they had really high hopes for, all the regression, and they were kind of like, wow, this is just not good enough. Well, here, Mike, when you look at it, Jeffrey's about points, and if he doesn't think it's going to happen, it's just not going to be good for Nick. So I'm very interested to see what happens here going forward here, and not only what the staff looks like, but whatever scheme they run, we'll have intel, and whoever the OC is, we'll have intel there. And the other thing is, Hurts is they got to get Hurts back to where he was. Remember, they gave him the contract extension. Though some would argue that they got a hometown discount based on the way Hurts played, which is incredible in 22. He obviously regressed this past season. That's going to be a big issue here going forward, is about getting Hurts back. That's another thing that's on Nick, by the way. That's on him.
We got Adam Caplan here from the Inside the Birds podcast, and we want to get some possibilities, man. We want to know, the listeners want to know, who's going to be the next guy? Who are some guys that they could be interested in?
Yeah, so we talked about on our show Monday morning, Zach Robinson, who's interviewing for jobs. He is a passing game coordinator for the Rams. Again, now this is the West Coast stuff. He works for Sean McVay. Eagles love what Sean McVay's done, that coaching tree, the Shanahan coaching tree. Keep an eye on Clint Kubiak, who's an offensive assistant, who is a former offense coordinator for the Vikings. Guys like that. Those are the kind of guys we're looking at. We brought up Gerard Johnson, who's the quarterback's coach for the Texans. Gerard was actually here as a OTA quarterback many years ago. Really sharp guy. Was maybe the highest recruited quarterback in the country when he went to Texas A&M. Like, he's a guy to keep an eye on. And again, that's Bobby Slowick. Not that they could hire him, but he worked for Bobby Slowick as the quarterback's coach, and of course D'Amico Ryan. So that's it, man. I mean, there are other names that we gave, and we'll give more, but just to give you a taste, and you'll have to listen to our show tomorrow. We're going to have some more stuff, but it's going to be fascinating to see that what the scheme looks like. And I think you brought up a great point. How much input is Sirianni going to have if it's not his scheme? Because he's a CEO, head coach. How much, and what's that going to look like? Because remember, Kevin Patullo is this right-hand guy who's heavily involved in game planning. What's that going to look like? I'm very interested to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, does Nick have the power? And we don't know this. We might find out tomorrow to say, hey, I don't want this guy. He's got to run my offense, and we'll see.
I don't think he would do that. Honestly, I don't see that.
Well, he might not have that big of a voice to be able to say that.
No, but he's the head coach. I mean, Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie could say, hey, this is what we want you to do. That's one thing. But with Nick Nick's not going to call plays. So when we talked about this a week ago, it was one of the first things we put out there. It's going to be fascinating to see, Mike. I'm so interested to see how this thing's going to break down.
Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball. Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, and obviously defense. We knew for some time they were going to make some defenses changes. So a new DC is coming in, but Adam Caplan, they had Gannon, the Fangio style. They maybe wanted Fangio, but that got kind of
they wanted him.
that got roadblocked. So they ended up with Sean Desai, who runs kind of that Fangio scheme. Yep. So are they stuck with that scheme? Do they want to stay there? We're hearing names like Wink Martindale, Ron Rivera, Mike Caldwell. I don't think they run the Gannon Fangio scheme.
Right.
So
a couple things here. So we talked about Wink Sunday night. We know that there's some interest there. Some coaching sources told us that keep an eye on Wink, and we definitely said that. But here's the question: if you're Wink Martindale, and this is important because this is a little bit inside coaching stuff. So, and it could be offense too if they talk to a veteran coordinator. If you're a veteran guy, knowing Sirianni's situation, knowing that he could be out after this season, are you going to want to move your family here? Like, that matters to coaches. This is inside coaching. This is the way coaches think. So if you're a veteran coach, considering if they have opportunities elsewhere, yes, if you're an offensive coach, I get why you would be interested here. There's no the talent levels hasn't dropped off at all. But if you're a guy looking at defense, not a great defensive roster. Real major issues on the back end, Mike. I can't talk about that enough. There are real issues on the back end, and if you have options, are you really going to want to come here? So we'll see. And by Ron Rivera, a little nugget for you. Ron Rivera, believe this or not, 2 years ago they changed their coverages to basically what Fangio does: match, carry, deliver. Ron decided to do that because that's the trend in the league, to go with more zone coverage, and hand it off to the next guy. That's what Seattle's done for years. I just found it interesting that Ron decided to do that. Like, that was something different that Ron had not done. And that may explain, obviously they know Ron. Howie might know him because when Howie first started, Ron was here working for Andy Reid. A lot of people don't know that as a linebackers coach, but and he knows this market pretty well. But that's something to keep an eye on. But they're looking at some veteran guys, as we understand. Jesse Minter is a guy I know they were very high on last year. I don't quite understand what happened. We never got an explanation about Jesse Minter, the Michigan defense coordinator, who if Harbaugh takes the Chargers job or the Atlanta job, Minter could be the replacement, so keep an eye on that.
All right. So, you mentioned the possibility of scheme changes and how possible that is. We just kind of threw some name possibilities out there. But, Wink Martindale would be a complete philosophy change. In fact,
totally.
The fans would probably be on board with what he brings. But what other possibilities do you think are out there?
It's one thing on Wink. It's funny. I remember when I told Jeff, I said, "Hey, we're going to go with this on our show, but I'm not going hard because I don't know that he would be interested, and I know they were looking into it. Remember, it was a mutual parting, so they don't have to. I know he's gone, but I don't think there's enough. They don't need to submit a slip, and he's out of contract because it was a mutual parting, which means they might have made a settlement on the money that they owe him. There should not be a contract offset. I don't want to get too into this because it's a little complicated, but it would not be hard from a contractual standpoint to get him. But see, he runs a 34 front, which the Eagles run, but he doesn't do the 5-man front stuff, and he's about blitzing with man coverage on the back end, where Todd Bowles is blitzing with his own coverage. So it's really fascinating. Look, he's an excellent coach. I know it was not a good season for him last year. There's no question. But there are always reasons if you want to put context to stuff that you could find out why. I know there were injuries on the back end, and they don't really have a lot of good pass rushers. I'll be interested to see what happens here. I would hope that he would interview, but I don't know the guy, so I've been around him socially, but I don't really know him. But I know coaches who work with him. One in particular said he wasn't really sure if he would interview. He said I'm sure the coach told me that, look, he's going to look at everything that's out there and he'll make a decision, but he likes Philly. He said he knows them very well because he knows the personnel, Mike, on both sides of football. Because again, they went up against him for 2 years, obviously twice a year, and plus that playoff game.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Ron Rivera, any intrigue there?
No, I mentioned that. So that's as I said.
I'm not sorry, not Ron Rivera. Mike Caldwell is what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, I know that's out there. Mike got fired by the Jaguars. I know Mike. He played here. Now, by the way, he does run a 34 front. I mean, he does do that. And one thing, another nugget for you inside football, you have to find out if you're a club why was the guy fired. Because you can't just the guy didn't do a good job. Well, you got to find out. You can't just make blanket statements. Okay, the guy was fired, but you got to find. Sometimes guys who do a really good job, they're the fall guy, or maybe they didn't. Maybe there was an issue with that you don't know about. You have to ask these questions, Mike. Yeah. But Caldwell was one of 10 plus coaches fired. But Press Taylor's still there with the Jaguars.
Yes, so we'll see. I mean, this is going to be interesting to see how this evolves. Let me ask you before we get out of here. Tomorrow, Roseman, Sirianni. If Adam Caplan had the first question, could ask anything, what do you want to know?
I would ask on Brian Johnson this, because I was the guy who asked Sean McDermott about the shark in the water one with Ernie Sims. That was my question. I'm not proud of it, but I happened to ask him what he thought about Ernie Sims, and remember McDermott responded, he's like a shark in the water, and that came back to bite me.
Yes,
to be honest with you.
No pun intended.
Very good. Exactly, but what would I ask? I would go, hey, Coach, you made it very clear that it was your scheme. Blame you. Well. Why did you fire Brian Johnson? Why is he out of a job? I mean, what and then the follow-up would be, Coach, you guys couldn't figure it out once people figured out your scheme. Where's part 2 for this? It'd be hard for him to answer that because that was the issue that we were told by league sources that Sirianni and Johnson and whoever else is involved, they could not figure out what to do once teams figured out their RPOs and slow them down. That's another thing we're going to talk about tomorrow. By the way, give Ryan Rothstein credit. He asked a great question to Moshe yesterday. It's actually I told Jeff this is what we're going to go. We're going to talk about the subject that Ryan brought up. It was in my notes from yesterday, and then I heard the interview this morning from your segment yesterday, and it was about it's this. Look, we know that they want to throw the football, but shouldn't it start with Hurts in the run game? That's another thing. Mike, they were dynamic at 22 with Hurts, as it really revolved around him and running. Well, why aren't we seeing that anymore?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Hurts in the run game was the biggest change from last year to this year.
Terrible. I mean, I get it. Combined touchdowns, the number was great, but we all have two eyes. The people, we watch, and it was not dynamic. I mean, let's call it like it is, Mike. The offense is at times hard to watch. And look at all the talent they have. This is not a talent deficiency here. Defensively, yes, particularly in the back end, but offense, to be honest with you, Mike, there are no excuses. This is the one that fascinates me. Not so much the defensive coordinator. I'm interested to see. I got to get out here in a second, but I'm interested to see who it's going to be. On your point, autonomy. Will that guy have autonomy? And how are things going to change here? I'm really interested to see that.
Yeah, well, and Adam, I think if you ask an offensive coordinator, hey, where do you think you need a talent upgrade on offense? He'd probably say, nowhere. I'm good with the offense you're giving me.
Yeah, look, Mike, that's not the problem. Not the problem. I got to run, my friend.
All right, Adam Caplan, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, you can get that on all podcasting platforms and on their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Mike Gill and the Sports Bash live, 97.3 ESPN.